Welcome back. I'm Roy with Rugged Badger Racing and Team Parts Badger. This is our 80 hours to Gingerman ChampCar, and we have a lot going on. If you watched the last video, our shakedown video, you know we have oil pressure issues. We have a new custom oil pan on the car, and I believe we have an issue with our pickup tube, specifically the pickup tube sealing to the upper portion of the pan that we designed. While braking, we have oil pressure of about 50 PSI going down to 30 PSI. When it's cold, it dips down to 20, and I do not think this thing can survive the race. I would love to do more testing, but I tried updating the firmware on my AIM unit and I bricked it. That unit is out to California. I have no gauges, I have no dash, I have no idea where oil pressure is. So we have no choice but get this oil pan out of the car, check it over. While that's happening, we actually have a second oil pan on the machine. And that second oil pan is going to hopefully solve our rack clearance issue and hopefully solve this oil pickup issue, because instead of a tube, we're using nice machine surfaces with gaskets, so we know we're gonna have a proper seal. So if that pan is not done, we'll reseal this pickup tube. If we get it done in time, fingers crossed, we can put that on the car and hopefully get this ready for the race, which is a little bit more than a week to go until we pack up. You'll notice we don't have body panels. Those are at one of the team members' houses getting painted. We have corner weighting and alignment done. That'll be a separate video, but let's get started. Just dive right in. We're running out of time. All right, making really good progress. We have the drive shaft disconnected, we have the power plant frame off, we have the exhaust disconnected, we have the downpipe disconnected, we have the radiator lifted, we have the intake disconnected. I checked over all the wiring, I have the shifter disconnected, I have the transmission supported. This thing is ready to lift. I've been waiting because I needed my engine hoist for a special delivery today, which is our new spare motor. And this thing is new. This is a fresh build from MWR Motorworks. And I gotta tell you, Ecotecs are cheap. I was looking at the eBay route, looking to buy another motor, thinking about getting something low miles, but with freight and everything, it's actually pretty reasonable to get a new fresh build. Now, in the Miata world, we're looking at, for a factory service limit type build with a little bit of porting, you're looking at 6 to 7 grand. Now, we never spent that. We usually spent around 3 grand, 2,500, somewhere in that territory for a local machine shop type build. Versus going with the specialty guys. But this is a specialty build. This is a guy that understands these Ecotec motors, built this to factory service limits that should generate substantially more power than this motor, and it was very reasonably priced. I'm really happy with this. It's going to make a great addition to our spares, and if we pop that motor, I'm not going to be too sad about it because a new, better motor is going to be going in. Nonetheless, let's get this motor lifted, let's get the pan off and see what we're looking at. All right, got the motor up in the air. I think I got all the bolts out. Let's see if we can get this thing off. I'm gonna try to use the hammer here and persuade it. Sounding good. Sounding a little more hollow, that's what I wanna hear. All right, so the gasket came off onto our pan, which is a good thing. All right, oil pan is off the car. Went way easier than I thought. So the gasket is largely intact. Except for a small section I'll be able to scrape up and clean the motor just fine for the next pan. Now, a couple areas. My main area of concern was this area right here where we actually have a metal tube that we actually knocked out of round trying to form this thing. And the idea was that this metal tube would seal to this top aluminum plate. It was my assumption that that area is not properly sealed. And what could potentially happen is when you're braking, the pan is experiencing G-force that's similar to this. This area is then exposed to air, at least on the underside. And when that's exposed to air, that's why I'm dropping oil pressure. Now with the Ecotec Miata pans, very similar issue, but it's happening right here at the oil pickup. And you'll notice I actually have a little bit of RTV in this area, where for the most part, the rest of the gasket is fairly clean, except this area. So it's not getting a very good seal to the motor versus the rest of the area. And that's likely just where the bolts are. There's nothing positively pushing this. Now we correct that in the next pan design. I also learned a couple things trying to get the oil out of this pan. First off, our trapdoor system works really well because I had a heck of a time getting oil out of our sump area. The second thing I noticed is oil really liked to stick to these sides and go down the side channels, not the center. Now, the way the motor's designed, it drains oil or drops oil into the center, so I expected it to stay in the center. I don't know if that's happening. And if that happens that way, it's missing our sump. Now, if our issue isn't related to this or this, what it could be is actually the pickup tube. Number one, the welds could not be sealed, potentially. Or the pickup tube is so far back here that when you're braking, that a little sliver becomes exposed. And what could take place, if you could think about the oil running down this channel, it's actually going to form an angle, and it's going to jump from the top plate into the sump, and it's actually going to skip that area right there. So unless that remains submerged, that could be the issue. But I'm running so much oil that has to be submerged. I just can't think of any way that that's not submerged, which then leads me back to this specific area. So the other pan is in production. It addresses all of the design issues that I've recognized with this in particular, so I don't have to make any last minute changes. But I do want to get this pan prepped and prepared just in case we have to swap to something else on the track if we have some other issue. So I'm going to get this thing apart. I'm going to do some more investigation, and stay tuned. All right, have some really exciting news. I just got word back from the shop that the second revision of the oil pan is completed. It's a Saturday. One of the guys came in and he was pushing really hard to get that done for me. We only have a few days before we have to pack up for this race, so it's super critical we have this. It's really critical because I have no idea what our oil pressure problem is with the first pan. In looking at everything, it really looks like the pickup tube's sealed. It looks like it's sealed to the engine itself, and the location is so low I couldn't imagine that being an issue. But it is really far back. And the issue I have is happening under braking, not cornering. So I'm gonna have to assume it's the pickup location being all the way in the back of the pan. Now on revision 1, we have no way to fix that. We were really limited on where we could go based on off-the-shelf pickup tubes without making our own, and we just don't have the tube bending capabilities. We don't have the brazing capabilities needed to actually assemble those properly. So the new pan revision, the pickup is right in the center, and it's nice and low, and most importantly, everything is a machine surface. So the pickup tube itself is actually a machine block that's hollowed out in strategic locations. That's going to seal. The bottom part is going to seal to the top part, and the top part is going to seal to the motor. So I'm really confident in this design. Now, as for the baffling, I do have a different design on baffling, which you'll see in a little bit here. But let's head over to the shop. Let's get this thing picked up. Hopefully we can get this thing together, get it back on the car, and then do another shakedown. All right, we're back at the garage. I'm really excited. I have all the pieces here. And again, it looks phenomenal. The team did such a good job to get this thing done. Let me walk you through it. So we have a top plate, same as last time, but we made those modifications like shortening these, putting a notch here. Now what's really different is our oil pickup and our baffling. So the oil pickup, this whole area is solid. So we're gonna have really good rigidity in this area to get a nice seal against the OE pump. And that'll adapt to the DDM Works gasket. Now underneath this, we have our own custom gasket, which is going to go to our sump. And again, this is all solid material right here. It doesn't add much weight, but there's a lot of rigidity, and I know we're gonna have a nice seal. Now what's unique is this is actually gonna go to a machined pickup tube. So we actually just used a block of aluminum, and you can see the notch here. We just slotted this out. So what's going to happen is all the suction is going to go through this area. This bottom part will seal against this bottom sump. And this is going to be our opening for where this is actually going to start picking up oil in the pan, which is roughly center of the pan. Now the baffling design is totally different. And what I did here is I wanted to replicate the OE style of baffling that they have on these pans. And what this actually does, it's effectively an oil multiplier. So think about all the volume of oil that's trapped in these areas in a 0G situation, when you just have gravity, 1G of gravity pulling down, but you don't have any turning or acceleration forces. So this is going to be filled to a certain level. As you begin pulling G, the oil is going to move this direction, and we have a much smaller area, pinch point. So what's going to happen is the level is going to rise in that particular area, and it's going to effectively increase the effective oil depth at the sump approximately 200 to 300% in all directions. So I think this is going to be a really good design. It's also cheap. I gotta tell you, the baffling that we did before, sure it's cheap, but it took a lot of time. I spent hours and hours fabricating those sheet metal parts, and it's just not a good way to mass produce these things. So with this baffling, using the machining process, we're removing material anyway. We just don't remove this material. And we have these really nice baffles here, and really it doesn't increase the cost at all. And I really like this. I think it's a much better design than what we had before. Now in super mass volume, you'd want this cast, and you would have a steel tube, and you'd have that brazed. But these aren't going to be super high volume. I think this is going to be the most effective way to produce these, and I think it's going to yield the best results for us. So let's get this thing together, get it back in the car. The car is waiting, it's ready for this, and then hopefully we can move on to a shakedown. All right, pan went together, super easy, it's ready to go. I went to test fit it on our spare motor, ran into a bit of a problem. As I was pressing down, the motor fell off of the stand. Very fortunate that I still have my toes. Luckily, the way it fell away from me. It ended up landing on the crank bolt here into the floor. Didn't harm this motor, but if you look, pulled the threads right out of the casting, but I definitely didn't use long enough bolts. You can see I only got 4 threads on there. Now granted, I should have pretty close to full strength with 6, but safety warning. Never had that happen to me before. Pretty scary moment, to be honest. Nonetheless, I got the motor repositioned here just so I could test fit that pan. I guess the show must go on. So let's get this pan installed and count our blessings. All right, the oil pan is on. I'm really happy. That was horrible. It was not fun. I don't want to do that again. I also think I snapped one of the bolts. It was one of the OE Ecotec bolts. It is near the rear, but not all the way, so hopefully the other bolts hold that. I'm not 100% sure it snapped, but I'm pretty sure. Nonetheless, we have lots to do. Let's get everything else connected, get this motor down, and maybe we can start it. All right, we are ready for first start. I built up oil pressure. I have about 4 quarts in here, plus whatever's left in the sump, which should be 2 quarts. But we're ready to fire up. I just cranked it a bunch of times without the, oh, I should probably plug those in. Just plug in the coil on plugs here, and then we should be ready for our first start. I checked building up oil pressure. There's no leaks. I built up to about 40 PSI. Sorry about the light here. Look at the aim system. Well, that's interesting, that fuel pressure is negative. That's really interesting. I don't know why it would say that here. Let me cycle power. Huh. All right, have an issue with the fuel pressure gauge. Let's start her up. Yeah, I still have a fuel pressure issue. I am almost positive I just checked that, and it was fine. It'd be the gauge right here. Oh! There we go. Came undone. Well, I'll keep an eye on oil pressure here. Now, I have no idea what's normal there, but it is deviating quite a bit. You can definitely hear oil through the oil filter, and I don't know if that's normal or not. But there's no way this thing's sucking up air. Just not possible. I'm gonna go ahead and open the garage door. It's quiet. So I'm gonna turn it off. I'm gonna check the oil level. And it looks like it's deviating about 5 PSI. but seems to be running good. Everything's good here. Fuel level is down, but I actually just drained the fuel tank. Wanted to do a fill test, but I certainly didn't drain that much. It's down to 5 gallons. It was at 10 gallons before, and I took out about 2.5 gallons, so that's interesting. Let's see here, getting smoke on the header again. Probably because I was touching that quite a bit. Now I don't see any leaks. Check under the car. No leaks under the car. Still have good oil pressure, temps climbing. Shut down. There is a lot of gurgling in that oil filter. I'm wondering if the way that this system is set up, if it ends up with some air pockets or something like that in that filter. That's really interesting. Just never remember hearing that before. All right, so I'm gonna let it run here. I just started it up again. Fuel pressure gauge is back online. Just had to plug that in. Oil pressure is good. Now in startup, oil pressure is up in the 70s and then it starts dipping down, which is interesting. It doesn't necessarily seem RPM related. I'm gonna let coolant temp climb. I'm gonna take a look. I've never tested that radiator fan. I wanna see if that radiator fan kicks on at a specific temperature. And I think I'm good, no leaks. Yeah, this ORB fitting is nice and sealed. That's good to go. Definitely have some wobble here. Didn't necessarily see that before. A little bit of oil. Got some water out of the tailpipe here. But I don't know if that's condensation or if that's a head gasket problem. It'd be really interesting if that's a head gasket problem. I didn't touch the head gasket in this car, and it seems to be running fine. Yeah, the radiator is bone cold. It's definitely warm back here. Wait for that thermostat to open up. I'm gonna check that rear leak again. See if there's any more drips. And it looks like I don't have any more droplets here. It's possible that that was just left over. Gotta be really careful. I got this spinning flywheel right here. Yeah, but I'm not getting any more leaks, so maybe I'll get lucky. The bolt that I broke, by the way, I think it was this one right here. Either this one or this one. Still no radiator fan. The radiator is still cold. The thermostat did not open up yet. So out the exhaust, I'm not getting, well, maybe I am. So I'm still getting moisture out of the exhaust. We hope that's not head gasket related. We're at 181 for engine temp. See what thermostat put in here. Probably 190, 192, something like that. Radiator is still cold. Okay, so the fan comes on at 223 in Malibu. I'm not gonna let the engine get that hot. So I'm gonna shut her down. Yeah, the fan is still not on. All right, that's it. That's a wrap. Now, I budgeted 6 hours for this project, and I'm currently on hour 12. Took substantially longer, just like everything with this project. But I'm happy to say the motor's in. We'll find out in the next video, so please like and subscribe. Tomorrow, we're gonna get the car on the ground. We are gonna shake this thing down, and we're gonna see if we have the same oil pressure issues or if our second generation oil pans solve the issue. Thanks again for watching.